Good day, everyone. My name's Maria Pienaar. I'm a founder of ScaleSpark, and we like to help build out the business infrastructure for early stage founders so companies can focus on growth. I am very excited today to be doing this webinar with Eric O'Neill, Morvareed Salehpour, Abhishek, and Dennis. So talking about cybersecurity and what's the latest happening there. It's a topic that's very dear in my heart. And what we like to unpack today is really how AI is accelerating the landscape for attacks, and really you're not early enough to start putting the right things in place. So with that, I would like to just ask everyone as you come in, please always keep your microphones on mute. If you have any questions throughout, please feel free to post the questions online. We will have some of our colleagues just monitoring the questions and feeding them to us. And then I also would like to ask that, let's keep this interactive. This is really a session for you as the audience, in also asking the questions that you would like to get out of this webinar. So with that, I'm going to hand over and ask all of my panelists to please introduce themselves. So Eric, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I'm Eric O'Neill. I'm a former FBI counterintelligence and counterterrorism operative. I'm also a best-selling author, an attorney, and an international keynote speaker. So I do a lot of talking about this subject. My claim to fame, if you've seen the movie Breach or you've read my first book, Gray Day, is going undercover to investigate and capture Robert Hanssen. He was an FBI supervisory special agent who had spied for the Soviet Union and Russia. That's how long he spied, for over 22 years of his 25-year career, and is known as the most damaging spy in FBI's history and quite possibly in US history. Since then, in addition to practicing law, I have founded a cybersecurity advisory and technology resilience company called NexusSure. And our tagline is enterprise security at small and medium business pricing. And if you would, grab a copy of my new best-selling book, which is just out now, Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime. I'm really excited about it. And what I wanted to do with this book is teach classified counterintelligence tactics. Of course, the FBI was kind enough to declassify a lot of this for me, to protect you from this often dizzying world of cybercrime and espionage. And I wrote it like a spy thriller. So I promise a page turner. You're going to want to read the next chapter. It's not going to put you to sleep like most cybersecurity books. And I hope you'll check it out and enjoy it.
Thank you. And Morvareed, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Morvareed Salehpour, business and technology attorney. I started off at a large corporate firm. After doing that for many years, I launched my own law practice, which I've been operating for the last 9 years to focus on working with small and mid-sized businesses and startups. So, when a founder or a business owner is trying to close a deal, launch a product, monetize their technology, or exit, that's where I come in with a particular focus on the digital and technology space. So a lot of software, AI, digital health, various types of tech services. That's kind of where I play in.
Thank you, Morvareed. And you also were quite keen in helping to recover funds from one of the largest Ponzi schemes.
Yes, in my big law days, one of the matters we worked on was we represented the trustee in the recovery of funds in the Madoff Ponzi scheme.
Oh, thank you. And then over to you, Abhishek.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Very nice to meet you all. My name is Abhishek. I am founder of Authorva, and I have spent almost 16 years in identity security now. At Authorva, we make sure that every action that happens within your enterprise has a named human owner behind it. So we trace down the beneficiaries of every actions, and actions could be taken by people or agents or machines, and we make sure that there is a human accountability behind everything. And it's great to be here. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Abhishek. And then over to you, Dennis.
Hi, good morning. I am Deniz Acayz, Chief Technical Officer at Caribou. I've been in conversational AI for a decade, and back when introducing myself also meant explaining what a chatbot is. Nowadays, thanks to ChatGPT and others, I can skip that part. I built 3 companies and exited one, and now in Caribou, we are bringing conversational AI into healthcare to allow healthcare workers to easily cope with changes like HIPAA compliance, data isolation, and the kind of security decisions I think we'll discuss here today.
Thank you so much. Well, I'll go back to you, Eric. These 5 years ago, I mean, with AI, things have accelerated just so much. Cyber attacks required some skill, and there's always been syndicates involved in how they were doing cyber attacks. But today, AI can generate a lot of spear phishing emails, clones, of voices, scrape LinkedIn profiles. How have you seen the landscape change? And what's some of the biggest risks and threats you see founders face when they start new companies today?
Certainly. Well, let's start back in 2024, because back then, which isn't too long ago, the global cost of cybercrime, just cybercrime on the dark web, right, was over $12 trillion. That's with a T. That's not a B. That's $12 trillion, which is an enormous amount of money. Today, it surpasses 14 trillion, and in a few years, at its rate of growth, might reach 20 trillion. That is an incredible amount of money from all of you and me and everybody going into the pockets of cyber criminal syndicates. The reason is the dark web. And the dark web now at $14 trillion is easily the 3rd largest economy on earth. So right now it goes the US, and then it goes China, and then it goes the dark web. And the dark web doesn't even have a physical place. It doesn't have borders, no brick and mortar stores. It exists as part of the internet, which is why it confounds the law enforcement, I was going to say the FBI, but also Interpol and law enforcement agencies all over the earth from taking it down. And actually in my book, Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime, I give a lot of examples of cybercrime syndicates who are attacked by the FBI, for example, and their servers are taken down and their encryption keys for ransomware attacks are stolen and handed out like candy at Halloween to those who were victims, and they come right back months later because bad guys also practice cybersecurity and they have good resilience practices as well. So they just come right back from their backups. Criminals are really successful because they model the best tactics that are used by spies. Now, espionage is still, cyber espionage is the top tier coming out of threat actors all over the world, particularly against the West. And criminals have learned that we can just model this success. And these large gangs of cyber criminals have actually hired intelligence officers to teach them the old school tactics of impersonation, confidence schemes, which is fooling a person into trusting a lie and believing it is true. So often when I'm on stage, I do the idea of, I play a game with my audience of, I say a word and I want you to, get the first image in your mind, and it's hacker, right? And then I say, how many people thought of a kid in a basement with a black hoodie typing away at a keyboard, and he hits one key and he says, what? I'm in. That's fiction. It's not how these things happen. What happens is cyber criminals learn about you using reconnaissance. They craft this believable story that is going to fool you into doing something you shouldn't do. And that is all old school espionage in a modern era. And AI, I got to it, Maria, AI has now become the single biggest fulcrum point in our lives. It's informing everything, not only how we work and how we write and how we do everything we do, but also how our children are learning. And just as it helps us do all the things we do, it helps cyber criminals perfect these impersonation attacks or these long school confidence scheme attacks that fool people into opening the door wide to their systems and letting them right in. So cyber criminals aren't attacking your computer systems, they're attacking your people, and that is the way that they get in. The dark web's grown into a crime business with pretty much unstoppable reach. The internet's expanding and growing every second of every day with the speed of a big bang. I imagine not being able to be on the internet for a week. And data has now become the currency of our lives. So attackers, and this is a big misconception that so many people get wrong, attackers don't really care who you are, how large you are, or how sophisticated you are, or what you do. They only care if you're vulnerable. They only care if they are going to be successful in launching an attack and getting you to pay by putting pressure on you, by extorting you, by locking all your systems so you can't access them. So to stop cybercrime, we have to think like the cyber criminals. We have to see all the ways they're attacking us. But to hunt them, we need to think like spy hunters. And that is what it's all about in cybersecurity right now. Assuming that the attack's going to get in, being able to spot it as soon as it lands, and have the tools to prevent the serious damage that will occur if you don't catch them quickly.
No, wonderful. Thank you for that, Eric. And I just saw a latest article or publication by CrowdStrike where they say the biggest aspect of how people get access to the system is still through valid credentials, which boils back to they out there to steal and fetch the credentials from especially people who've got access to the systems and how they get in. So that hasn't changed throughout all the decades. It's a lot faster. Morvareed, now thinking about it from a legal perspective, and I know we had many conversations around that, we see that a lot of, especially new founders, are now using templatized legal contracts, and you do help companies a lot with commercial contracts, especially with the enterprise customers. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see companies made, and what are some of the risks of not addressing concerns, especially when it comes to data privacy and breaches early on in the contracts and the implications on the cleanup afterwards?
Yeah, I think a lot of businesses just fail to kind of realize the significance of all of this. And so a lot of times they don't make the effort to actually have a professional brought in to help them review and negotiate their contracts with customers and vendors and strategic partners. And data is really a chain, right? It's not like you contain the data and you're fully in control of everything, right? So it's what you do with the data, but it's also what your customers do and what your vendors do. And you really need to be protecting yourself on both sides in your agreements. So some common issues I have seen, for example, are that one, they customers will have often very burdensome, particularly if you're dealing with enterprise customers, very burdensome like privacy and security provisions that a startup isn't taking the time to really understand and negotiate to something that is kind of in line with the actual use case. And then they are automatically kind of in breach, right? So it creates a situation where there's liability from day one. Even kind of a larger issue I often see is that a lot of companies don't address their vendor agreements. So they don't take the effort to, again, have those reviewed and negotiated. And then a data breach happens by a vendor, right? And all of a sudden now you're responsible with your customers. So again, if you've not negotiated the right protections and provisions in place with your vendors, you don't have coverage for that liability. And then if you haven't negotiated with your customers, you're fully liable for everything that's gone on, which can put you out of business. So it's very important to kind of make those liabilities kind of line up on both sides and to ensure that you have appropriate protections in place with your vendors and cyber insurance to also help kind of protect when things go wrong, because it's more a matter of when versus if for any of this.
Thank you. And what's the average penalties for breaches these days?
It could just be a lot because there's so many people involved. And I think, one, you have like individual kind of costs associated with individuals who may have to be notified and may have damages, but there is also business disruption. And I think that's an area where a lot of businesses forget will affect their business and don't, cyber insurance often doesn't cover. So yeah, you might have your system's tied up or down. Maybe it's like a vendor system. This has happened to clients where a vendor system has had hacks, and so it's been down. And they've been unable to operate their business for a month and lost clients. So that is a loss of revenue. And if you're not, again, appropriately covered and haven't negotiated on the front end, you are taking that loss versus having some recovery from that loss.
Yeah. And I see we have a question from the audience.
Yeah, Sandra asks, she's interested in the profile of startups that are attractive targets for cyber criminals.
Anyone?
I can take that question if you want,
Yep.
Maria.
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead, Abhishek.
Yeah, so if your startup has any cash in the bank account, you're very attractive to them. Or if your startup is hosting any PII or PHI data, you're very attractive to them. And I can give an example in our early days. Whenever it's a very simple hack, it's not AI hack, it's like a manual phishing kind of a hack, right? So from the early days when we started hiring a lot of interns, right? And like every other founder, we were hiring interns left and right to get things done. And now these interns are fresh college graduate kids. They are very happy to join their first job. They brag about it on LinkedIn and all. So hackers would go and find their phone numbers on social media and send them a text message. Hey, I'm Abhishek, CEO of your company. I'm stuck somewhere. Can you go to CVS and buy me a scratch card or something, and I'll refund you later. I forgot my credit card at home, right? And this is important. I have to, send a gift to the customer. And people would, luckily, they would call me and text me that this from some other number, we are getting this message. Do you really need something? Well, I mean, it's common sense that the company gave them a job, so we really don't need money from them, and I'm happy that they had it. But the idea is that they are not gonna spare anyone. So every single opportunity that guys will get to extract anything out of you, they will do it, right? So nobody is safe.
Yeah. No, thanks for that, Abhishek. And while we're with you here, now you do a lot of work on agents and making sure rogue agents don't come in, because I say what I've seen a lot now and heard a lot is now there's the concept of token maxing. Everyone's just dialing up agents, and I've heard someone say yesterday they've dialed up 1,000 agents using OpenClaw and Claude and Claude Code, all the different LLMs. Now, I don't even know how one can manage 1,000 agents at a time, but that just dramatically increases the risk. So tell us more what you've seen on the risk around the agentic world, and also what are some of the aspects that people can do to be a bit safer, because I'm seeing people just blindly sharing secrets with the agents they use.
Yeah, that's a very important and loaded question, Maria. And a lot of keywords that you used in that question are actually the answer of this question as well. If we now your question is like, what are the risks for specifically for startups with all these AI agents thing, and how can people prevent them? First, we need to understand as founders, um, two concepts. Number one, the speed at which things are happening now is a lot faster, and it is beyond human control, and that's the reality, right? As soon as we start coming to that, realizing that reality, we'll do better in terms of putting other operations around it. For example, like 200 years back, if someone is traveling from Los Angeles to San Francisco, they might take a few days. Now it takes almost an hour because they are not using horses anymore. AI is the superjet plane, and that's about it. You're still going from point A to point B, right? And the security is different. When you were traveling on horses, you might carry a gun to protect yourself. You're no longer allowed to carry a gun in an airplane because you might harm others, right? So the security parameter or metrics will also change with this new mode of transportation or this new method of doing business. We have to first realize what are the strengths and weaknesses of this new method of business, which is AI, right? And the biggest strength it has is the speed at which things happen. That's number one. Number two, we have to have a proper understanding of our critical assets. What are we protecting? If we do not know what we are protecting, right, or what is at stake, there is no point in doing a research on AI. So the step one, even the step zero, is having that understanding of what you are protecting. And this is, I believe, I'm very confident, a responsibility of a founder to make sure what that they fully understand what they are dealing with. Another example is, it's a very sad example, but there is a hospital in Finland. It's a psychotherapy hospital. I wouldn't name them, but in 2020, their data got hacked by some English hackers, and what they did with that data, it's like 40,000 psychiatric patients were affected. They started texting them and imposing as the doctors or counselors for them, and they encouraged them to commit suicides, and a couple of people did as well. So it was a national emergency. Similar hacks still happen, right? I was just doing a random search on Google. In 2026, three hacks happened on the same lines, which is very sad. So if you are a founder and you are dealing working with a hospital or a bank, especially, or some defense agency, right? It becomes your responsibility that you understand what kind of data you are dealing with and how you are handling, and you are very serious about it, right? Because if a breach happens in 2026 as compared to 2024, the damage that happened in 6 months will now happen in 6 seconds, right? So that's the repercussion of this thing.
That's actually quite scary, but it's good to know that there are things that one can do and put in place, and considerations that one should have. I know there's two questions from the audience which we'll quickly address as we go along.
Yeah, Rohit asks, what is the minimum cyber insurance coverage needed and what should be covered? And then we've got a question from Gabriel regarding as more startups build AI pipelines on top of fragmented data stacks and external LLM providers, where do you see the biggest emerging risk? The model layer, the identity layer, or the data layer?
Thank you. Let's first address the cyber insurance question. Morvareed, I know you're the expert in that one.
And I think you need to talk to your insurance broker. They're going to really be the experts for what amount is appropriate for your business. So I think it really depends on like what kind of data you're processing, what kind of clients you're working with, and all of that. I mean, for enterprise deals, I see several $1 million in the contracts that I kind of deal with.
Yeah, and are the insurance is it now a requirement in a lot of cyber insurance? Is a requirement in a lot of enterprise contracts that you see?
For sure, for sure.
And
Yep.
I know that. Go ahead.
It's a hard requirement. Like any contract we are signing, they are, without that, there's no deal. So it is a hard requirement. And I mean, for how much it is, mostly, your customer will drive it. It depends on how big of a business contract you're getting to, follow up on what Morvareed just said. But most of the customers, they demand that this is the bare minimum you're gonna get. It could be like a 5 million coverage, 10 million coverage, depends on who you are dealing with.
Yeah. Now I know, Abhishek, both you and Dennis, you early growth stage co-founders as well, from companies. How do you deal with the cost of the cyber insurance, and typically, how do you offset that cost, especially when you're dealing with enterprise customers, because you both deal with enterprise customers?
Dennis, you want to answer that question?
I mean, it is, of course, there are many layers to this. I can say two or 3 points about it. One of them is like I always consider compliance is not security, because even you might be compliant, you documented your processes, but the real security is when if your engineers actually do on a Tuesday afternoon. So you have to put some checks in places. And the second one is mostly the boring basics. Like when you create a strong foundation, I believe. After that, all the other parts actually can fall easier. It's boring basics most of the time, like using a password manager instead of sharing scripts and all the stuff during on your regular communication channels. Two-factor authentication, yes, it can be a problem sometimes. It's a little bit slow, but it is important. Single sign-on if you can afford it. Like least privilege, which is something very easily skipped in the early stage companies, because everybody like tries to do lots of stuff, but the real thing is you should not be having access to something that you really don't need to have. And so, go ahead, Abhishek.
Yeah.
Would you like
No,
to continue?
thank you. So that helped address where do you see the biggest emerging risk, the model layer. But I mean, credential management, I agree with you, is one of the key things, right? Or one of the first foundational aspects. Abhishek, from an insurance perspective, how do you guys offset the cost of insurance, and give us a feel of some of the level of insurance you sometimes need to look at, and
See,
costs around what you see?
right. See, we bear the cost. That's an
Yeah.
investment from our end to gain the trust of our customers, right? So it is, cyber insurance is a very expensive insurance, but then it is our responsibility that we are, hosting the data. We are giving them a piece of software. For a bank, for a hospital, it is a lot of trust that they're putting in our capabilities to handle their information well at an early stage company. And this is like, a very minimal we can do to be thankful for their trust. So we bear that cost of insurance. And you can work with many brokers, just do window shopping, right? There are so many providers out there now. And so you can negotiate. But then over the time, uh, when you have customers, when you have revenue coming, you won't even, I mean, this becomes a very minuscule in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, cyber insurance is absolutely critical. If you don't have it,
Yeah.
you're in a lot of trouble if you're in the middle of a breach. One thing that the insurance company will do is act in a way like a quarterback. When you're when the fires are burning all around you, they'll make sure that you have a good attorney that will help you with your data privacy issues. They'll make sure that there is a company that is on call to come in and do the remediation and threat hunting and find the bad guy. It will offset some of the costs that you're going to have to pay for the data monitoring you'll have to hand out. If you are doing any kind of business where you are going to be storing, protecting, or have access to data, particularly of individuals or customers, which is like all of us, right? You do need to have that cyber insurance. One thing that we recommend is, for any small business, growing business, even now mid-tier businesses that are moving to enterprise, is to go get a cybersecurity assessment. And that is where an operation like we do it at NextShore will come in, take a look at your company, look at where all the weaknesses in your security are in not just your technology, but in your people and in your processes and your policies. And often what we found, and we do work with certain cyber insurance companies, is that when you have that vulnerability assessment and you do the work to shore up deficiencies and become a safer bet for the cyber companies, you can get a pretty decent reduction on those policies, because you're not as big of a risk for them if you're engaged in a practice of good cybersecurity. On the LLM side, that second question, before you start investing in AI, before you give access to AI to your employees, before you really go down that road, make sure you understand your technology. We see huge mistakes that companies make, especially as they're small and lean and moving very quickly, not understanding where their data is and protecting that data and understanding intrinsically their data stacks and who has access. And then suddenly they're bringing an LLM and AI agents into the mix, and it can cause chaos. So you want to make sure that you understand your data architecture, your technology, you've built your cybersecurity well, and then you add AI strategically and tactically in a way that isn't going to open you up to additional breaches or problems.
Yeah. And please go ahead, Morvareed. I was going to ask.
I was just going to say that for really, and particularly in like enterprise deals, the most of the enterprises just require like SOC 2 audits at this point. Like that's the way to really like streamline deals. Like if you don't have a SOC 2 audit, you might not get the deal. Even if you get the deal, you're going to have to go through this full like security protocol and then agree to all these security policies and processes that then are going to be non-standard or among different kind of customers you're working with. So it's just not really sustainable. So if you're really like targeting enterprise deals, that SOC 2 audit is key.
Yeah. And I want to, thanks a lot for that, Morvareed. I want to move over to you, Dennis, because you've been a CTO of many different companies and now also with Caribou. So you're very involved in the product and software development stages and managing teams around that. And I know early stage, everyone just looks at the CTO. You know, the responsible person for cybersecurity in early startups. So tell us around some of the foundational architectural principles you put in place when you start up and dial up new companies. And what are some of the hacks and breaches that you've either experienced previously and how you're mitigating that moving forward as you dial up new technologies? And also, I mean, as I say, you do a lot of AI deployment as well. So tell us more about that.
Let us start with two things that happened to me. One of them is my earlier company, and the other one is for a company that I advised. The first one was actually like I got an email from my CEO at that time with a document attached, waiting for my signature. I mean, and the funny thing is, I was really expecting a document like that from him that day, and I opened, but the thing is, I just felt a little bit weird about the email address, and I just checked, and people get smarter and smarter with email addresses that look like the legit ones. But of course, it was not a real Google sign-in page. And I just, regardless of if I changed my credentials, I put more checked. But the funny thing is actually my CEO also hacked from an email coming from one of our VC firms. So it can be coming from different sources, like from the sources that you least expect. And this was something that after that, we introduced some regular phishing checks. There are systems like that send different attacks to all our team members. So you can see which of them actually click the link, which of them actually type their password, etc. And this was one of the things that prompted us to do that. And the second one, of course, is a AI-generated bug, and it is very common. It's for the last year, I think we've seen lots of different sophisticated attacks based on agentic flows, etc. A company I advised actually had one of these bugs. The code implemented the token validation function. I am not going to be very technical on this part, but that function actually checks if the color is the real one, is the one who claims him to be. And actually, it looks really perfect. And the funny thing is, function actually was not implemented or called anywhere, so it was just there. And the thing is, it passed from the AI code review from that time. I think this is one of the very common things. This is how human minds works. Like after AI gets it right for 100 times in a row, you start trusting it and you just start to skim and you approve. And this is something that I've seen a lot of times. So actually, there should be many systems and checks in this part as well. Because I always say something about AI. It's like productivity multiplier. Yes, it helps in a lot of cases, but also you have to be very careful. There are many team level and person level checks there. But most of the times after the boring basics, I think you can delve more into details on how to put extra checks. Even if they are AI backed checks into your workflow, it is fine. I think you have to put a system in place to be able to mitigate these things. And actually, I don't want to repeat myself. The boring, regardless of this, like the boring basics actually like fix most of the stuff. Currently you mentioned that there are some credentials or environment files leaking online, and this has been the story for wipe coded apps for the last year, and like all of this stuff can be easily mitigated with a simple password manager that can store the files. Or and also offboarding is also important. I've seen this in some companies as well. Just having a written checklist and really applying it is important. I've seen a company that actually did not remove one of their old employees from their OpenAI team, and that person actually used their OpenAI for another company almost a year. And this is not just cost; this is also lots of vulnerabilities as well.
Yeah, and I mean that I know is your whole world as well, Abhishek, is the on and offboarding of people, especially early stage. There's lots of contractors and interns and things, and that's still the biggest risk of having these dormant users and user credentials in the system. So, have you got some comments on that?
Yeah, this is a huge problem, right? Not just for an early stage company, but for any company altogether. Like termination control is the most difficult control to implement cleanly on the planet, right? That's the crux of 16 years of identity security experience. And because now, if we go a little bit deeper into it, we do not understand what all things people are using. There are there are some custom based applications, local databases, now local AI agents that are sprawling out of their own laptops, right? And so without that visibility of who can access what, directly or indirectly, implementing this termination control, forget about it, don't even sweat about it, it's going to happen, right? So I mean, for example, let's say I am a sales rep in some in some large company, and they give me read only access to CRM systems like Salesforce or HubSpot, where I can only read accounts data from that, right, from that, for that company. Now, what I do is I install a third party company software called SalesLoft. And this breach actually happened last year, October, right? And this SalesLoft thing, I give it full access, like full API access to Salesforce. And I become the admin of SalesLoft Drift. On paper, in theory, like what is visible by the naked eye of the hierarchy of access, I am an read-only account in Salesforce. In all practical sense, I have read and write access to Salesforce, and nobody will know if if they don't know that I am the admin of SalesLoft. All they will think like, hey, there is a service account. SalesLoft is an application that we downloaded from the marketplace of Salesforce. Everything is pretty safe, right? So 47 companies, including Google, Palo Alto Networks, and all those like that are like pretty prominent names in security world, right? They got impacted by this particular hack. And a month later, the same thing happened with Gainsight. Exact same thing, right? So have one real world example, I was surprised. This just happened 2 days back, right? So we had an intern who left, and his email ID was being used to log in into 48 different application, and we are 11 people company, right?
Oh gosh.
So, so that is the, now imagine that scale at as you grow. So be
Yeah.
very careful with who has access to what.
So it seems like, and now coming back to you, Eric, around the audits are so important, and it's definitely worthwhile spending the budget on that because that helps set the priority. So how do you guide companies through all the different aspects once you've done this audit on where the priorities from a budget perspective are and addressing the others?
Yeah, certainly. Well, we work with the IT team, and often with a lot of companies we're working with in the small and medium business, they don't have a security team. So we're providing them a virtual CISO that can see from inside the company what some of their problems are. We charge very little for the advisory services for the for that initial cybersecurity audit to try to find the holes, because we want to be with the company along their life cycle in trying to make them more secure. Budget's difficult. Budget is always difficult, but part of it is the fact that you don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish, right? Is that the way it goes? Because what can happen is you're reserving budget and say, we don't really have the budget to implement these things. And what we do is we try to scale it. Here's the most critical thing that you need to do right now, right? Here are the next few things. Like, for example, a company we're working with right now, the easy, really critical thing that ended up being very hard was you should probably turn on two-factor authentication everywhere. We found that IT teams in their different offices were turning it off because people were complaining that it's too much of a pain to log in. It's like, well, okay, that will be your single biggest point of fail right there. And we actually were able to show where workstations were logged into by people who were changing things in the company in order to get benefits for themselves. The second, as everybody's been talking about and is so critical, is looking at those dead accounts, what we call dead accounts. These are people who aren't there. They're contractors who have left. A great example of this is, if you remember some years back, like right after that thing we never talk about anymore, right? I'm going to say it, the pandemic. Amazing how that's completely left the zeitgeist of human experience. We pretend like those years we spent at home never happened at all, right? But it did. And during that, if you'll remember, a huge company, massive critical infrastructure company here in the United States, Colonial Pipeline, who is almost solely responsible for moving petrol, gasoline, and aviation fuel from the West Coast where it's refined over to the East Coast where it's used, right? Was brought down by a pretty large-scale ransomware attack. The way that the attackers, this Russian cybercrime group, was able to get in was just buying a username and password for a contractor who's using a VPN to get in off the dark web. Just bought it. And I probably bought it in like a pool of 1,000 usernames and passwords. And going through, we're like, holy crap, this is a big company. Let's try it, right? And there was no two-factor authentication, and they were in. And that's how they got in and caused all that mayhem. I mean, people near where I live on the East Coast of the United States were fighting at gas stations that were running out of gasoline, even though nobody could drive anywhere anyway because of the lockdown. But people panic when they panic when there's any kind of crisis. So I have to have gasoline just in case I want to drive in the future, right? Yeah. So these simple things can often make a huge difference between being the victim of a cyber attack, a large catastrophic cyber attack, and surviving another month, a week, a year. So what we do is we kind of redline those. Another thing that companies often make a mistake is thinking, one, it can't happen to me, or two, hey, what I have is enough. I've got a basic cybersecurity solution. Nobody's really after me. And then they're attacked and they find out that basic cybersecurity solution doesn't do anything, because now we have no ability to do the forensics, to do the analysis, to try to see where the attacker landed and where they went and what mayhem they caused. And now the lawyers get a little upset because they say, we can't say what was stolen. So now you've got to go and to everybody who conceivably could have had their data stolen and say that you've been breached and your data might have been stolen. That's why you see all of those companies who say, your data may have been stolen. We're not sure, but we're going to give you identity theft monitoring because our courts really don't know what to do about this. So yeah, there are really fast, important things you can do. And then there's down the road things. And what we do is we try to scale with the budget they have and the budget they're going to have in the future to make it all work.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for that. I mean, I think one thing people also miss, and I've seen it when I was wearing the hat of a CIO of large $1 billion+ companies, is that people forget that these guys may get access through these dormant credentials into your system, but they won't immediately do something. They
Right.
might sit there for a couple of weeks or months monitoring things before they really then initiate the attack. And that's why the cleanup is so important all the time, and doing that in an automated way. I'm going to just get back to a question from Rohit, and I knew this one would come up. He says, do share your thoughts on mythos and LLM risks in general. I'll start with Dennis. Do you have any thoughts on mythos and LLM risks once
I
this
mean,
model gets released?
yeah, like Eric actually mentioned, when you usually have a breach, you have a specific amount of time to act. And with tools like that, that time is actually very shortening very much. Like they can launch very sophisticated attacks easily, and it can be more fast than a human. Like most of the common security stuff, like bastion hosts, that's what we are using them to jump to internal systems, for example. They are usually open for a specific amount of time, and we trust that a human cannot, for example, find that IP and that key in a reasonable amount of time, but maybe AI can. So that's different thing. And for the other LLM part, I think me and Abhishek and also Eric mentioned lots of stuff. If you are having an agentic flow, you have to be very careful about what skills you use, what kind of plugins you use. You have to check everything, and not just for your own computer or the main servers. You have to check every developer's tooling. That's important.
Yeah, thanks. And Abhishek, your perspectives on mythos?
Yeah, see, it is like there is no such thing in this world right now that can fully protect us from these AI-led attacks anymore, right? If anyone is claiming that, they're actually lying about it. So embrace it and be ready for it. But what we can do, like when I was my mother, she was a bank manager in India, and when I was a kid, whenever there was like bring your kids to work day, I was allowed to roam around in the entire branch everywhere, but I was not allowed to go near the cashier's chest, right? So because that is the most secretive protected area of the whole establishment. Now, your establishment will also have that secretive cash chest that you want to protect. So, focus on that. How the attack is coming, from where the attack is coming, right? It becomes critical only after you really understand what you are protecting. So, I'm saying this again and again. If you do not understand what you are trying to protect, you will not be able to protect it at all. One example from last year, 30 companies in United States got impacted. Anthropic released a report in November itself. In this attack, a China state agency-led hacker group was able to convince Claude AI that they are contractors hired by these American companies to perform pen testing for them. And then Claude AI got convinced and learned all the skills of pen testing from open source tools and
Oh
started
boy.
stealing credentials from these companies. Now, these companies never hired any pen tester. They had no idea. They had no idea that somebody is even attempting an attack. They were just getting scanned against their open vulnerabilities, and their credentials got leaked, and they had no idea that their credentials got leaked. Hats off to Anthropic to come out in public and say that this happened, and that's how they knew. But then the companies or the victims who got impacted had no idea that their data was getting stolen,
Mhm.
right? So that is the situation right now. Now what you can do is like you can make sure that you are improving a lot on your vulnerability scans. You triple down on it, right? You bake it into the process, and you are taking really good care of your entire application security, your data handling practices. Be really disciplined about it, right? Then after that, it is what it is. After a point, it is what it is, right? Really. But then do whatever in your possible sensible sense that you can make it happen, right? Take all the possible measures to protect your data, or your critical assets. And before that, spend some time to really understand what are your critical assets.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot. And then Morvareed, I want to just go then next to you and then Eric. So from a contractual perspective, what are some of the contractual perspectives then with commercial entities? Are you seeing changes around LLM language and attacks in these contracts?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, just taking an over kind of overlooking picture of what's going on, I think a lot of the kind of, data breaches and privacy violations that happen aren't really the result of like hackers. It's the result of bad policies and procedures in place in businesses. And this is happening a lot with AI, and it's happened with all sizes of companies, from small companies to big companies like Samsung. It's just not having any real kind of policy or procedure in place. And so you have employees who are going out and putting private and confidential and proprietary information into these different platforms, particularly the public facing versions of them. And so you are having, data breaches that are happening that way. You're having basically proprietary information disclosed. For example, when Samsung had proprietary meeting notes and code put in, if something is a trade secret, it's no longer a trade secret once it is shared with a third party. So you're losing protection there. I know a lot of people, I've been telling clients like, hey, turn off your note takers, like um, don't put in like what we're talking, like things that we're working on into these AI platforms, because that's considered increasingly a waiver of attorney-client privilege. So a lot of businesses don't really realize the significance of using AI, and that's why it's so important to actually work with your legal team to get an AI policy and procedures formally like put together and distributed to your personnel, and then educate your personnel as well and train them on how they are permitted to use these technologies, in what forms, which platforms, which accounts, so that you limit these kind of just breaches that happen kind of unintentionally just from people using the tools.
And that also include your interns, your contractors, not just the employees, right?
Yes, all personnel.
Yeah. Eric, your view on mythos and
Sure, on all of this, and Morvareed's answer right there was just so perfect on the dangers of having unruly AI within your systems. Mythos, look, mythos is worrisome, mostly because the media is making people worry. The bad guys have had their own AI for a long time. We've seen them use it. They do it for everything from constant vulnerability scanning for targets of opportunity. The AI doesn't sleep. Their agents will sit there and just test networks to try to find ways in, unpatched vulnerabilities. They'll do reconnaissance for them on individuals. They'll go through social media to try to find their systems engineers and give them ideas for a point of attack. Remember that the dark web AI has no guardrails. It will return the most obscene, angry, horrible answer that the bad guy will ask, and do it with a smile, and like a very happy puppy trying to help their cyber criminal master. So Mythos just adds to those problems. It's very efficient, and it requires cybersecurity technology to be deploying its own AI in order to, as Denise said, think faster than the human. Right? Humans, we just can't pivot as quickly. Now on using your own AI agents and giving them access to data, just to follow up on what Morvareed said, I'll provide a quick story. A company had an AI agent and had provided it to, and I think it was just like Copilot, had provided it to everyone in the company. Like, this is our new AI agent. You can do it to do all sorts of things, and it's going to be wonderful and make us more productive, right? Small company. Yeah. And one of the execs decided, I'm going to try it. And so he just asked the agent, tell me every place in the company and every document that my name is mentioned. Right. And, the agent went out there super happy and returned all these documents. And one of them was, it made his eyebrow raise because he looked at it, and it was a planned layoff document list from HR, because the agent had access to all of HR's files and wasn't segmented. in that anyone could see them. So it returned the document, basically telling this guy who's about to be laid off. So he went and got a lawyer, and that lawyer contacted everyone on the list, and they sued the company before they could even start laying them off for wrongful termination.
Wow.
So you have to be very careful what your agents have access to and who can see that data that it returns.
Yeah, no, I mean that's that is just so true. But it again comes back to a lot of the policies, and one of the things that I'm taking out of it is when you are using agents, you've got to have some playbooks in play also for how your employees or contractors or anyone in the company use and deploy agents that also comply to the security policy. So it does start with having a plan together. And we've got like 3 minutes left. And I see there was a question about quantum, but I'm not sure we're going to have time to address that. But and I'll just start with Dennis. If you can, in one breath, tell us if you can advise any of the founders of basic things to do as a CTO, especially if there's technical founders, what are the core things where you will start? And then I'll just go through the list.
I think I'll just summarize it 2 sentences. One of them is hope is not a strategy. And the second one is it is good to be paranoid in these times and in this level of responsibility. Just processes, double checks, and hopefully an eye for any issue, maybe.
Thank you. Morvareed.
I think it's just kind of being proactive and realizing that privacy and security issues are part of the architecture of your business and your products. And so you need to be looping in experts in legal and security from day one to really build a sustainable business and products.
Thank you. And especially talk to your lawyer before you sign any commercial agreements with enterprises. Eric.
Certainly, it can happen to you. And one of the most dangerous things that can derail a small company that's starting up is a cyber attack. Many small companies who are hit by a ransomware attack, for example, don't survive. So you want to take those steps ahead of the attack. I'll just add really quick. For the individual interested in quantum, I do spend an entire chapter on that and what I fear, especially on how it's going to decrypt so much of our information that is protected right now. So just to follow up on something Morvareed said, you want to plan ahead of the attack. You want to do it when it's chill. You don't want to wait for the pressure situation to be examining your security when there are flames all around you. You want to do it now when you have the space to do it. And hopefully make yourself safe from these cyber attacks.
Thank you. And then Abhishek.
Yeah, so as a business owner, you guys take care a lot of trade secrets, your employee data, and your customer data. So you have to be responsible. You are responsible, and you have to act responsibly on how you handle that information. So, and losing that information means exactly equivalent to losing the business altogether. So let's get serious about it and act responsibly as a founder.
Well, thank you. And I really want to thank the audience for your thoughtful questions. As I say, these sessions are really for you and for all of us to learn. I really want to thank all my panelists, Dennis, Morvareed, Eric, and Abhishek, for all your insights that you shared. We will also post a lot of the links and LinkedIn profiles. Please, they were posted in the chat. Feel free to connect up, and we'll also post this in the show notes in our Ops or Die channel on YouTube as well, and you will be able to see the recording on the live section in our YouTube channel. So feel free to subscribe, feel free to connect up, and thank you so much for your time today.